Stop scrolling, this real-life inspired story will shock you. In the halls of a prestigious university, a genius professor made a joke that would ruin his ego forever. Solve this equation, and I'll marry you. He said it to humiliate a janitor, until the janitor walked up, wiped his hands on his uniform, and solved the unsolvable. What happens next will leave you speechless. Before we continue, smash that subscribe button, because stories like this don't just entertain, they change you. At Harrington University, where red brick walls whispered with the ghosts of Nobel laureates and ivy climbed like ambition itself, the mathematics department lived in a world of its own, governed not by democracy but by genius, or arrogance disguised as genius. And at the center of this world stood Professor Stanley Whittaker, a man whose intellect was matched only by the sharpness of his tongue. He walked the lecture halls like a king, his students trembling before every theorem he wrote, as if mathematics itself bowed to him. One rainy morning, as thunder rumbled like an omen, Whittaker unveiled a massive, bizarre equation across the board, something that looked like the offspring of chaos theory, quantum mechanics, and sheer ego. His grad students gaped at it as if staring into a mathematical abyss. Then, with a smug chuckle, Whittaker said the line he'd become infamous for, "Solve this equation, and I'll marry you." The class laughed nervously, knowing he said it not as humor but as mockery, his way of reminding them that none of them, not even the brightest PhD candidates, could ascend to his level. But at the back of the hall, sweeping the steps with a quiet precision, was Marcus Reed, the janitor most students barely noticed. He was tall, quiet, unassuming, with calloused hands and eyes that always seemed to be studying something invisible. That morning, while everyone laughed, Marcus paused, leaning on his broom, staring at the equation with an intensity no one else caught. Whittaker saw him looking and scoffed, "Even the janitor thinks he can solve it." The class laughed harder. Marcus didn't. He simply walked closer, silent as a shadow, studying the symbols with an unsettling calm. When the professor arrogantly said, "Go on then, Marcus, solve it, and I'll marry you myself," the room exploded with laughter. No one expected him to take the chalk. No one expected him to step toward the board. And absolutely no one expected the moment the world seemed to freeze as Marcus Reed, janitor, nobody, ghost of the hallways, began writing with the certainty of a man who had solved equations far more monstrous than this. At first the students thought he was doodling, but then his symbols aligned, each step linking like gears in a magnificent machine. Whittaker's smirk dissolved. A hush swallowed the room. Marcus didn't hesitate, didn't backspace, didn't stumble. He moved through the problem like a surgeon, slicing through complexity with elegance. 10 minutes later, he set the chalk down gently. "There," he said, "it reduces to a trivial case if you treat the middle term as a disguised eigenvalue transformation." The board was silent. The room was silent. The professor's soul was silent. Whittaker, the man who mocked nations with his intellect, stood staring at a solution so perfect it might as well have been divine. And then, the twist that would change everything, Whittaker didn't laugh. He didn't argue. His face went pale as paper. Because the equation was his unpublished research, a problem he had been trying to solve secretly for 7 years. And the janitor, the quiet ghost of the university, had solved it in 10 minutes. By the next morning, the university buzzed with the story like a hive struck with a stick. Videos of Marcus solving the equation spread through campus social media like wildfire. Students whispered, professors argued, and the administration panicked because nothing threatens a university more than an unpredictable genius emerging from the wrong social class. Marcus Reed, previously invisible, became the center of a storm he never asked for. Reporters attempted to sneak onto campus. Graduate students begged him to tutor them. Professors, people who once didn't bother remembering his name, now looked at him with a mixture of suspicion, awe, and fear. Meanwhile, Professor Whittaker spiraled. His humiliation was complete, his equation solved by someone with no degree, no academic papers, not even a resume that hinted at genius. Pride collapsing, career trembling, he demanded an investigation. He must have cheated, Whittaker insisted. He must have somehow stolen my research. But witnesses, hundreds of them, saw Marcus solve it in real time. No notes, no preparation, pure intellect. The administration reluctantly called Marcus into a private meeting. Dean Halverson, a man who softened his corrupt soul under layers of charm, sat across from Marcus with a strange smile. "We'd like to offer you a scholarship," he said, "and perhaps a quiet, non-disclosure agreement about Professor Whittaker's equation." Marcus stared him down, unmoved. "No," he said simply. The dean blinked. "No to what?" "No to the scholarship," Marcus replied. and no to being your secret. This baffled them. He wasn't grasping for opportunity. He wasn't impressed by prestige. Then the twist unraveled. Marcus revealed he had once been a prodigy, a real one. At age 15 he was accepted to MIT. At 16, he won an international mathematics tournament. At 17, just when his future glowed brightest, his mother was diagnosed with late-stage cancer. He dropped everything, college, competitions, dreams, to work full-time jobs to pay for her treatment. She died anyway, and Marcus, crushed by grief and guilt, walked away from the academic world forever. "I didn't come back to solve equations," he said. "I came to sweep floors because floors don't judge. Floors don't break." Whitaker, standing in the corner during the meeting, felt something twist in his chest, not pity, not compassion, but jealousy. Marcus had once been everything he wanted to be, a natural genius, a mind untouched by ego. But Whitaker wasn't finished. In a desperate attempt to regain power, he challenged Marcus publicly. "If you're truly as brilliant as you pretend, then debate me. Prove your mind on stage. A formal competition. You win, I resign from this university forever. I win, you disappear from academia entirely." The crowd roared. Marcus sighed. "I don't want your career," he said. "I don't want your world." But things had already spiraled beyond his control. Students, media, faculty, they all demanded the showdown. And when Marcus's quiet janitor friend, Evelyn, told him, "If you walk away, he'll paint you as a fraud forever," Marcus finally agreed. "One debate," he said, "and when it's over, I go back to my life." But fate had other plans, for both men. On the day of the debate, the auditorium resembled a gladiator arena. Television crews hovered. Students lined up like fans at a championship game. Whitaker arrived in his finest suit, trying to mask the terror under his confidence. Marcus arrived in his janitor uniform, pushing a mop bucket, not as mockery, but because he had worked the morning shift and refused to be late. Reporters snapped photos like he was walking a red carpet. The debate began with Whitaker attacking aggressively, firing complex theorems like arrows, trying to overwhelm Marcus with sheer academic showmanship. Marcus responded calmly, almost sadly, dismantling each argument with surgical precision. When Whitaker presented a theorem meant to trap Marcus, the janitor responded, "You're assuming the function is continuous on the closed interval." "It's not." Gasps. Then applause. Whitaker stumbled, sweated, lost composure. Marcus, who didn't want this stage, had somehow claimed it completely. But just before the final question, the debate took a twist no one expected. A group of board members rushed onto the stage, halting the event. The dean announced breaking news. Professor Whitaker had stolen major parts of his unpublished research from a deceased mathematician whose archives were recently digitized. Marcus's solution proved it, not because he exposed Whitaker intentionally, but because his interpretation matched the original mathematician's intentions perfectly. Whitaker, cornered, collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. The debate ended instantly. The crowd erupted with whispers, pity, anger, shock. Marcus stepped away quietly, trying to escape the chaos, but students surrounded him, begging him to stay at the university, not as a janitor, but as a professor. He refused. "I told you," he said softly. "I'm done with that world." But then Evelyn, the friend who always believed in him, grabbed his arm and whispered, "Maybe it's time you stop running from the life you lost." Her words cut deeper than any equation. For the first time in years, Marcus reconsidered. That evening, as the sun melted into the university's skyline, Marcus went back to the lecture hall where everything started. He expected it to be empty. Instead, he found Whitaker sitting alone, broken. "Are you here to gloat?" the professor whispered. "No," Marcus said. "I'm here because you once joked that you'd marry whoever solved that equation. I'm here to tell you, I don't want your apology. I don't want revenge. I just want you to learn." Whitaker looked up, eyes red. "Learn what?" "That humility," Marcus said, "is the real mark of a mathematician." Then, in a twist that stunned even Whitaker, Marcus accepted a temporary lecturer position, not for glory, but to teach students who reminded him of who he once was. As for the marriage joke, students teased him about it for months. Marcus would laugh and say, "The only person I'm proposing to is my future." But the real twist, a year later, Marcus didn't marry Whitaker, but he did marry Evelyn. And the university, it built a new mathematics wing named after the janitor who solved the unsolvable and taught everyone that brilliance can wear any uniform, even one with a name tag that reads custodial staff.